Shalom, Alexander.
Shalom, Tamar.
Give our listeners a background about this whole story. Give us a summary background so they have a foundation of what to work with here.
The Skripal story.
Yes.
Well, here Skripal was a GRU, which is to say military intelligence officer in Russia, who collaborated with our intelligence services and provided very important data on the Russians' military. He was blown in due course after a few years, arrested, tried, convicted to 13 years in prison, of which he served, if memory serves, 4. And then he was he was pardoned and officially exchanged, which should have been case closed. That's the background. I mean, to say that Russian hitmen then have a moral right to move into Britain and murder whomever they want is just misreading not only this situation but the whole subject of international law.
What is your position? What is happening here?
Well, I think that it's instructive to juxtapose what's happening now with what happened in 1971 when Britain expelled 100 Russian diplomats, yet no one else followed suit. It was Ted Heath's government that did so. This time around, we expelled 23 of their so-called diplomats. They retaliated with tit-for-tat expulsions, but the reassuring aspect of it is that all Western governments, including, most important, the United States, sort of followed suit and acted in accord with us, thereby sending a message to Putin and his junta that further acts of terrorism on our soil would not be tolerated.
Okay, so I just want to say here that I brought this subject up with people, and some people were saying, well, why would Britain expect anything different? If one of their spies had turned and started helping the other country, then it's obvious that that country would get rid of that spy. So why would Britain be so upset? That's what they were saying.
Well, to begin with, not any side would do that because, for example, I don't remember us killing Philby or Burgess or McLean or any of those people. To begin with. Second, Sergei Skripal, actually was tried, convicted, served several years in prison in Russia, and then was pardoned and officially exchanged for Russian spies. Third, he is a British subject. And the murder of a British subject on British soil has, for centuries, been regarded as a casus belli. I mean, an absolutely legitimate one. I mean, moreover, this was an act of chemical terrorism, endangering and, in fact, hurting dozens of bystanders by way of collateral damage. And another thing is our own Putin fans, I call Putinistas, say, well, he's a traitor, isn't he? Well, my point is the one side's traitor is the other side's hero.
Right.
Like for example, we regard Philby as a traitor, but the Soviets gave him medals and are now displaying his portraits on Lubyanka walls, side by side with other KGB heroes. I mean, the question is whose side you're on. If you're on the side of the West, then Skripal is a hero, not a traitor.
Let
I
me
mean,
ask you this question if I can. With what's happening now, you have two major superpowers. You've got Russia, you've got the United States with Britain, who have expelled each other's diplomats, not entirely, but they've done some, and this is very, very fragile now. And people are already worried that with North Korea in the picture with nuclear weapons, with Iran with nuclear weapons, with the war in Syria, Turkey, etc., NATO, all of this, people are wondering whether we're going to be seeing, God forbid, a World War III. Do you think that this expelling of diplomats between two superpowers is going to be a catalyst for that? Do you think it's going to have any weight whatsoever with that?
I doubt it, to be perfectly honest. Well, first, what are we supposed to do? Are we supposed just to tell the Russians, by all means, come in and kill whomever you want? I mean, we've got to respond. And this response, incidentally, I regard as a gross underreaction rather than overreaction, because it doesn't hurt Russia at all. I mean, it does hurt them in the short term by destroying their intelligence networks in the West. But they'll rebuild those networks. I mean, what would really hurt them is impounding the assets of Russian government members and their acolytes.
So example, you're saying instead of just doing this at a diplomatic level where you're kicking out their diplomats, to actually take their assets, to freeze their money, etc.
I would say not instead of, but in addition to.
Okay.
I mean, we have, for example, their vice prime minister Shuvalov here, whose official salary is something like $107,000 a year, and yet he owns $500 million worth of properties in London and around London. Now, clearly, these are funds obtained by criminal means, and our laws do allow to impound assets obtained by criminal methods, as is the case in most other countries. But anyway, the Russian turnout showed something like 76% support of Putin. But anyway, I mean, I think the fear of a Third World War, on this basis, at any rate, I can't vouch for North Korea, but on this basis, I think such fears are unfounded.
Okay, so we're not looking at World War III. That's good, and that's what you're thinking, and that's good. But so, how would you like to sum everything up? You have like about 1 minute.
Well, I think that it's a good sign that finally the West has caught on to what's going on in Russia, which I call the klepto-fascist regime, and it's prepared to act together to confront it. I think that's a very promising sign, and I hope the Russians do get the message that heinous acts on the soil of Western powers will not go unpunished.
Do you think that diplomats will be returned anytime soon?
I doubt it.
So you don't think that we're going to get over this cold patch?
Well, eventually, yes, but not soon, I don't think. In fact, I think it's much more likely that more expulsions will follow. I think our government has already made noises to that effect. And the Russians, of course, I mean, how shall I put it? The evidence against Russia in the Skripal case is circumstantial, and perhaps a court of law wouldn't convict on that basis, actually. However, there's clearly a case for Russia to answer, and no court in the world would throw the case out for lack of evidence. However, the Russians haven't answered the case, or rather answered it with lies and threats, including threats of global extinction. But I think it's just bluster on their part. I think the Russian government isn't about world conquest, as the preceding communist governments were. It's really about stealing Russia blind. But in order to be allowed to do so, they have to give the Russians something, because 20% of the Russians live for less than £100 a month, $120 a month. So people have to get something. So they get this image of a muscular Russia getting up from her knees and regaining her superpower status, to which she's not really entitled at all. Russia is basically Nigeria with snow and nuclear weapons.
Nigeria with snow and nuclear weapons. Well, we're going to have, that's an interesting statement there. We're going to have to leave it there. I want to thank you for coming on. Thank you, Alexander Boot.
Thank you very much, Tamar, and thank you for having me.